Mr. Ray Tsang. George. Thank you so much for taking time to be here today for a conversation for the George Mihaly Show.
Yeah, I'm excited. Thanks for having me. This is awesome. Yeah, this is quite the setup.
It's my distinct honor to call you a friend and collaborator, and I'm super fortunate to have known you now since 2013. So we're coming up on a 6-year anniversary in January, which is when we first started working together.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that. I thought we were at the 5-year mark, but we're almost at 6 in a few months.
Awesome. So I'm going to give a brief bio about you for anybody who's not familiar with who you are, and we'll dig in. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with this friendly face, this is Mr. Ray Tsang, 3-time Emmy Award-winning filmmaker and co-owner of Only Today, film production company based here in beautiful Portland, Oregon. Mr. Tsang has worked all spectrums of filmmaking, big sets, small sets, commercial, documentary, narrative. He films, directs, produces, has edited, but your focus is as a director,
as a DP,
director of
for
photography.
The most part. Yep, director of photography and a bit of directing. But
awesome.
Yeah, I have a team, so I don't have to do all those things.
How big is the team for Only Today? The film
So there's
company?
about 6-7 of us full time, and that's our core team. But then I also feel like we work with another dozen other people around the country, almost on a daily basis as well.
And sometimes around the world. You mentioned you just booked help in Cairo, Egypt for filming.
Yeah. Just the last 10 days, I've had to book 2 shoots, one in Cairo, one in Abu Dhabi, and just produce them. But that part of the world is about 12 hours ahead of us. So I was working in 2-3 different time zones at once and basically getting 3-hour naps when I had to wake up again to check my email, check my messages to see if there were any emergencies.
And I'm curious, the 6 of you guys combined on the team for Only Today, how many total miles would you say, if you had to estimate, did you guys fly this year, 2018?
That's easy. We flew probably close to 600,000 just between 4 of us. I know Zippy and Joyce, they both are going to hit around 175,000 miles.
So a lot of time away from Portland, but by choice.
Yeah. I will, that's the best part about what we do. It's not easy. It's a lot of moving pieces, but we do it by choice because we love it.
Awesome. I definitely want to get into the origin story, but I guess you just answered the question that I had, is like, why have you decided to dedicate your career to filmmaking at this time?
Going back. So do you just want me to start?
No,
back?
I guess if you were just thinking like high level, like why is it that you decided that filmmaking and you as a creator was the way that you wanted to focus on spending your time and contributing to the world?
Yeah, definitely. So long story short, I wanted to find a way where the work I do wasn't just to put food on the table, wasn't just to buy things, but I wanted to give to the world and just if I'm going to be working for 30-40 years of my life, I want it to have a positive impact. And I found filmmaking, but through that storytelling, as a great way and fulfilling way for me to do work, find people that are willing to pay me to tell stories, but also to give a voice to a lot of people who otherwise wouldn't have a voice. And in a way, it just helps support different causes, groups, people, raise money for nonprofits. And so I think that's the most fulfilling part about what I do.
Yeah. And I guess, again, giving a little bit more background on the work that you have done and continue to do. Like this year alone, you guys have produced around 60 stories for Facebook.
I think for Facebook, it's around probably the 40 mark.
40 projects, okay.
Yep. About 40 for Facebook. And then 40 more for various other clients and projects and personal passion projects.
So around 80 projects with a team of 6, 7.
In-house.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Assuming also that a majority of these projects happen outside of Portland, so they require a lot of producing beforehand, and then you guys also take care of the post-production, so the editing.
Yep. So I would say about 95% of our projects are out of state. So anywhere from California to halfway around the world to Southeast Asia, Africa, India. So our projects take us everywhere. And
did you guys hit 6 out of the 7 continents this year? I'm pretty sure you did.
Maybe 5. Yeah, pretty close. So, and then all our editing is done in-house or done stateside.
Cool.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, so for our friends or listeners who are out there, because we have people tuning in maybe on the live stream, but maybe people who are listening just audio only, the type of filmmaking that Ray and Ray's team takes on is pretty high in the complexity, if you were thinking about it, because it requires not only bringing teams across the world, but also producing the projects across the world, oftentimes before even getting to those locations, across all different languages. And it's really interesting and admirable that you and your team continue to deliver with such high success for these projects that are really auspicious. And to think that you guys have produced, 40 alone just for one of the biggest companies in the world, and another 40 all within the time span of 1 year is a lot to take on. So I just wanted to share my admiration and try to explain a little bit into the glimpse of the, I don't know, you're really working at a very high level, and so it's really impressive.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So Ray, before filmmaking kind of took its role in your life, what was Ray Tsang doing? Yeah.
Prior to filmmaking,
yeah.
I was in finance. I was in private equity, and so we were raising a lot of private money and then putting it into investments, real estate, buying different companies, stuff like that. So this was straight out of college. Did that for about 3 to 4 years. And about 3 years in, I realized it just wasn't fulfilling. And I needed to, I just embarked on this journey to figure out, what else can I do? How can I actually do some good for the world and not just do good for me? And then that just led to one thing and another. And then now I'm in filmmaking.
And to give a little bit of the backstory, and then I'm kind of curious how you could maybe explain a little bit, maybe even before that, but your partner with Only Today is also your life partner, your wife, Joyce Tsang, also multiple time winning, Emmy Award winning filmmaker as well. There was something really unique that happened when the two of you had your honeymoon, and then you came back from the honeymoon. What was that story? Because I find that to be really fun.
So Joyce and I got married back in 2009. And as a wedding gift, she got me a 5D Mark II, which is not the first, but one of the first DSLRs, photo cameras at the time, which would shoot video. And so we brought that camera out to Hawaii with us on our honeymoon.
This was 2009.
2009. Yeah, mid-2009. And in that, I forget how long our honeymoon was, but in those 10 days, 14 days, I fell in love with film and photography. And as near the end of our honeymoon, I told Joyce, this is what I wanted to do. I knew nothing about how to use a camera. I only knew how to use the auto setting to shoot. And yet I loved it, and I knew this is where my life was headed. And I told Joyce as soon as I got back from Hawaii, I was going to quit my job. But I also knew that she was also thinking about a career change at the time. So I told her we're gonna go back to LA, and I told Joyce, you can quit your job and pursue this and start building whatever it is that we want to build. But if you don't, I am gonna quit my job. And so like we came back. Joyce put in her 2 weeks notice, almost like within the first week, and then I followed up 6 months later, and that was what kind of sparked it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so then the two of you started a film production company together. But I want to know, when you guys came back and your family and friends started to find out these major life changes that you were making, and I hope Joyce would be okay with me saying this, but like she was also, she had a very successful career, patent holding engineer,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
with another very large company that she was working with. And the two of you with very stable jobs, very stable careers, very promising trajectories, decided to quit your jobs to become filmmakers because you wanted to, utilize these cameras. Like, what was the reactions from family and friends?
Yeah, no one outright said it was a bad idea.
Uh-huh.
I think people were very respectful and very nice. I can tell a majority of our family and friends thought we were a bit nuts. And so, parents would come up to us and ask us to reconsider, or ask whether we needed a loan to pay our living expenses. But I think what really kept us on this path was those half dozen friends or so who were fully supportive of us. They wanted to know what our business plan was. They wanted to be part of the branding. They wanted to hear what our week was like every week, and in terms of how we found clients, what we were doing. And so, and seeing their enthusiasm really gave me the motivation to just keep pushing and pushing. And we found our biggest support was those handful of friends, and that allowed us to take risks that I think were very some big risks with like money, with living situations and stuff like that. We took a big chunk of money that we had saved up from working through college in the early years, prior to filmmaking, that we had set aside to buy a house. And we just decided, you know what? Nope, it's going into building a business, buying equipment, setting up a business, funding us until we were cash flow positive. And so that was probably the biggest risk initially, because we had nothing. I mean, as kids, we had nothing to lose except for maybe the money we had on us. And so once we were able to let go of the money and not care about it, everything else felt pretty easy after that. At least for me. I'm not sure about Joyce, but
What were some of those first projects? Because you mentioned that you came back and you started to get into this business, but did you have a vision as to what the beginning of the business would look like for you? And then what was that?
Yeah. I knew that we definitely didn't have the skill set or enough business experience, or maybe just a practical experience, working experience, to really hit the ground running. But I also knew we had to learn. I knew there was a lot we needed to learn, a lot of failures and mistakes we had to make, but we also need to make a living. And so naturally, being in LA where it's wedding season year round, we just started hitting up our friends and friends of friends to shoot their weddings. And so, I mean, our first couple of weddings were like, we did for free, and then it was like $500 and then $700. But that allowed us to keep learning. And like during the weekends or weekdays when we weren't shooting anything, we were just going out to the park or in our backyard and just filming each other. And then taking some workshops here and there, and just looking up a lot of work, finding people who were much better at this than we were, and reaching out to them. And I think that recognition that we needed to learn, we needed to make our own mistakes, allowed us to really quickly get through that period of our careers.
Yeah, it's really interesting because when we worked together at this one film production company, which we'll talk about probably later on. It was interesting for me at that time to interact with lots of different filmmakers that were students of the educational materials that the company we worked for together like subscribed to. And more than half of those students, if not more, were professional filmmakers whose bread and butter really was wedding films. And it's really cool that so many super talented filmmakers actually come from that kind of trajectory where they start making wedding films and then they branch out into other genres of filmmaking, whether it's commercial production or documentary or maybe narrative filmmaking. There's really something about, I think, like the live pressure of a wedding that by necessity forces people to kind of like step up their game, or some people decide to not, but that's a different story. What was the connection to wedding films and maybe the company that you guys had film your wedding? Because there was a connection there.
Yeah.
Right.
So while we were engaged, Joyce on a wedding forum found out about this company called Still Motion. So out of the blue one day she sends me a link, check this out, saw this wedding video, and I thought it was like the most amazing thing I've ever seen done by a small production company. Right. It was something that I would have expected to see in theaters. And so, and this was like a wedding film, and I felt a little tingle in my heart, a little, had some goosebumps. And I realized, oh, if like a wedding film done right or done with care and thought can make me feel like this, what can we do if we like take this and then put it in towards like documentaries and movies? And so long story short, this company Still Motion, so we hired them to film our wedding. And they came out, we met them, and that kind of just started the relationship of working with them. I think it's like a year and a half later. After,
so you guys get married, you come back, you start your business, and then you get a call from Still Motion.
A year into our business,
help out.
We get a text message from the people working at the people we knew at Still Motion, asking if we wanted to like help with their weddings and help with their projects. And then soon after that, got another text message asking if we wanted to just join their company and open up San Francisco office. And so that's what we did. So back in like I think late 2010, we just packed everything up from LA, drove and moved to San Fran to open up a studio there.
And around that same time, there was some unique projects that you guys started to work on together for the NFL, along with like CBS and Showtime, because they all kind of have an affiliation together. What was that like to go from weddings to then being on the field for the National Football League?
I want to say it was a pretty, we were very lucky when someone from the NFL first reached out to us. It was because a producer saw a wedding film on Vimeo that we had posted. And that kind of got her to reach out to Still Motion and I guess the NFL at the time was trying to revamp what they were doing, from storytelling to how they film games and stories.
So this is like 2011, 2010, 2011.
I think this was around 2010. A lot happened in an 18-month period. So I think it was 2010. And so they brought us out to a Chargers-Packers playoff game in San Diego. Joyce and I were still living in LA at the time. And they just kind of let us do whatever we wanted and gave us free reign in terms of how we wanted to approach and tell the story and do it our way. And that kind of put us on this trajectory for sports and commercial work after that.
As well as then a really like big project, which was the Game of Honor documentary film
Mm-hmm.
that you
Yeah. So
were part
about,
of.
I think it was like a year and a half after that came, a producer from CBS Sports reached out. He wanted to do a documentary on the Army Navy football rivalry,
Mhm.
and so he brought us on for that, and that was a year long project, taking us from West Point to Annapolis, back and forth throughout a year, covering these students who were, some of them were only 18 years old, and they were basically studying academics. They were training to serve in the military after graduating, and they were also training to play, and they were also playing football. And so it's just the most intense and crazy experience I think we've ever been through. Yeah.
And were you guys doing other projects while you were filming that documentary as well?
Oh yeah. We're never only working on one project.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure we did so much in that year. I couldn't even tell you. I would have to go back to my email and start pulling call sheets.
Because there was weddings, there was commercial projects for maybe
Yep.
even like the fruit company at that time,
Yep,
right?
yep. We did some stuff for
To be unnamed.
Yep, to be unnamed fruit company. But we were also doing a lot of education. A lot of people want to really understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, in the wedding world, and like in just event filmmaking in general. And so we were doing a lot of workshops and putting out books, putting out I don't even know what they're called, like tutorials, from very basic, simple stuff to a lot more advanced storytelling techniques. Yeah.
Uh, Anybody who's listening, I mean, you can only imagine how much work that is. And that's something I've always known about you. Just like your work ethic is, no one will outwork you. No one will outwork Ray or Joyce, for that matter too.
Or George.
I don't know. It's a different story. But where does that work at? Like, have you ever thought about that? Like, where your work ethic kind of came from, or what gives you the motivation to keep going and just keep going?
Mm-hmm. I never really thought about it until way long after the fact. But looking back, I was never scared of work, I guess. And maybe, I don't know, part of it, I think it's because growing up, my parents were immigrants who came in the late 70s, early 80s. And they had to work hard to put us through school, to start their own business. And there were no 8 or 10 hour days. It was minimum was like 15-hour work days for them, running their own business or working for someone else. And so I grew up in that, where it was my parents had to work really hard, and I knew there were a lot of things I wanted in life as a kid. And in the past, like growing up, it was all very superficial stuff. It was like very material things, money, cars, whatever, in my early teens. But as soon as I turned 18, I realized I want to work hard, but I also want to work hard on things that matter to me, that are fulfilling. And so that was like kind of my journey starting when I was 18, where I never even thought about work. I just assumed that was by default. I needed to put in the hours. I needed to put in effort. I needed to give up a few hours of sleep every day in order to achieve my personal dreams. And so it could have been partially ignorance too. You just don't, if you don't know what you're getting into, and then you don't really think about it. And that has instilled, I think, helped shape our work ethic, helped shape how we run our company. Because we know, yeah, you can put in a ton of hours to get anything done, but at some point it's also unsustainable. And so we run a team, and we try to stick to a 9 to 5 schedule, unless we're traveling, unless there's like this impeding deadlines. But yeah, I don't know. It's just in my blood, I guess, and Joyce's too.
You guys really get after it, and it's I really admire too with with what you have been doing with Only Today, which is now like it's coming up into its fourth year.
Third
Only
year,
Today?
I think.
Third year.
Yeah, different iterations leading up to it, but into its third year.
Yeah. But you, and sometimes like I've worked with you guys as well on certain projects, but it's really unique to find a team that works together where you guys will work hard, but it's also really important for everyone on the team to be aware, and this is something I've continually seen from you, to find time away from work to come together and decompress. And you guys make it like really like a priority. Like last year there was a big team retreat. I know you guys do like 4 times a year, so I guess quarterly, some sort of fun activity, whether it's golf,
we try to
whether
do team
it's
building events.
Yeah, team building events.
Yep.
That's exactly what it's called. Escape rooms, you know. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, and I think it's a really important quality of life to pay attention to, especially in the creative world, where it's just so common for people who work in agencies to really just burn the candle at both ends and then keep burning it after it's even charred.
Yeah.
And that the effects on health and relationships, it's just, not positive. So yeah, I mean, the work ethic coming from parents, and I know that maybe this will be a story in the future, but the story of how your parents came to the United States too, it's like really incredible. Like your dad and I don't.
Yeah, both my parents were had to escape out of their countries because of the communist takeover, because government takeover, and so they didn't just immigrate and leave China and Vietnam, but they had to escape. And it's a movie I'm in the process of writing.
Yeah. It's I mean, anytime I think it's like anybody who has parents who have immigrated, or if the person themselves is an immigrant, I think it's something that you can relate to, and it's easy to take for granted, which is not something that you or your team does, but it's so easy to take for granted all the, I don't know, like ways of life and qualities of life that we have here in the United States, that, are easy to forget it, just how fortunate we are to be here and to have all the opportunities we have, regardless of whatever is happening politically or socially, economically. It just doesn't really compare to the struggles, the real problems that people have had.
I count my blessings every day. Like every day I wake up or I go to sleep and I think about, I am so damn lucky, like, to be able to be doing what I'm doing, because it never feels like work. And we have incredible like friends, colleagues, and clients who really support and believe in the work and the work we're doing, but also believe in why we're doing it. And so I'm always waiting for the tower to just crumble, and I have to work harder, I guess, or do something that I'm not enjoying, because I think life can be a lot worse than it is. And so every day I'm very fortunate, and so knowing that every day I just put everything out there, anything I can do to like tell a story, help someone, help service our clients. I don't hold myself back because we're not getting paid enough, or because someone looked at me the wrong way. You just don't have time to be petty. You have to put your best self out there, and sometimes that comes at a cost, maybe a financial cost, but I don't do this for the money. So if I don't care about reaping massive bonuses or salaries, as long as it puts food on the table and allows me to support our team, support everyone that we work with on a daily basis, that's, for me, it's way more important.
I want to get back to this piece too, about why you decided to create a production company versus working independently, which is another route that people working in the creative industries can take. But I want to make sure that we kind of get all the major timeline pieces in place, because it's really, it's so interesting. It's like, we didn't even talk about how you ended up getting into finance. How did you end up getting into finance,
How did
actually?
I end up?
Because you had a job in finance that people will study, get their MBA, and then work there. Meanwhile, you were working in finance as a sophomore in college? Or?
Yeah, so I dropped out of college when I was in between my sophomore and junior year, because it was just moving so slow, and I wanted to just do big things, and I had all these ideas, and yet I realized I couldn't split pursuing these ideas and studying for academics at the same time. And I was never good at school. I was horrible. Like the fact that I graduated from high school is an incredible achievement. And that's a whole nother story how I think I got through high school. But I dropped out of college, and within maybe a year or two, I through some great relationships, I got a job at this private equity firm. And I was there for 3 years, and even though I didn't have my bachelor's, I didn't have an MBA, which everyone around me at minimum had an MBA. I feel like it didn't stop me from doing my best work, and I had to work harder to learn to keep up, but I was able to. And then by the time I knew clearly what I needed to go back to school for to kind of take me to the next level in terms of what we were doing in finance and in private equity, I think I was ready to switch into a more creative profession.
Something that gave you a feeling of more meaning, like you were doing something.
Yeah. Definitely, like when in finance and what we were doing, it was all about the return. The return for every dollar that we invest, how many more dollars can we get back? And that was how every project was based on. So I was an analyst. I was supposed to look at these massive projects, properties, land, and then make an assessment on whether it was worth investing in. All came back down to like the dollar, the value add of what it adds to a community, to a city, was all kind of like secondary to that. And for me, that just wasn't, I think, worth my time. I wasn't interested in it. Yeah.
I love it. So we kind of left off at a cliffhanger. You and Joyce were working at Still Motion. You guys were working on projects with the NFL. Then you're filming a documentary for Showtime, Army and Navy. At the same time, you guys are filming weddings. You're running educational programs, creating educational materials. What happens next? The documentary gets completed. There's some award ceremony or something?
Yeah. So I think it was maybe I don't remember how long, but soon after the documentary was completed and released on Showtime, and we had like a theatrical screening and everything, we got an email one day letting us know, George, your cup's about to. We got an email saying the documentary, A Game of Honor, was had 9 Emmy nominations. And so it was across the board, from like best or outstanding documentary, sports documentary, to editing to sound design. And so there's so many categories. I couldn't even list them all out. And so that was like a huge thing. I mean, we didn't win anything yet. We just got nominated for these Emmys. And then soon after that, a month later, the award ceremonies came up. Most of our entire team was in New York with everyone we worked with at CBS, and we went to an award ceremony and left with 3 Emmys.
Amazing.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it was an incredible moment.
So this is 2.5 years essentially after you guys left your jobs?
Yeah.
Not the typical typical results, not guaranteed.
It felt like 5-6 years in, but now that you put it into perspective, that was only maybe 2.5 years
Amazing.
after we quit our jobs.
How many people does it take to put together a documentary like of that scale?
Oh,
Like producers and filmers and editors and
I would say at
everybody
the end of the
involved?
day, my best guess is for something like Game of Honor, it was probably up to 30 to 40 people had a hand in a documentary, maybe even more.
What was the time frame from like the idea to completion?
About a year.
So that's pretty
Yeah.
fast as well.
Yeah, someone came up to us with the idea. We started filming soon after that, and then a year later, when the class graduated, that's when we went from we started on when there was a new freshman class coming in, and ended with the graduation of the school year, the following year. So that was like a year-long project.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And we'll fast forward a little bit through it. You won the Emmy, continued to work with the production company for some time, and then went separate ways.
Mm-hmm.
What came after working with still motion?
So, like any creative out there, I think I went through a little bit of a burnout near the end of my time at Still Motion. Like it was like maybe 4 years in. I don't remember, 3-4 years in. And I felt like I could be doing more. Again, that itch came, and I just knew that we could be doing more. We could be telling more impactful stories and doing more. And we had just come off working on a year-long documentary on child slavery around the world. And so that itch was really strong. And I didn't know if my next endeavor was going to be in filmmaking or in something else. And so I quit. I think I remember that evening I had just filmed like the NCAA championships or something. Big celebration, and then I was in the room with Joyce, and I was like, I'm done. Like, I need to take 3 months off to figure out what I'm doing next. So I quit, and then I think a month into my 3-month hiatus, the industry reeled me back in. And I jumped right back into filmmaking after that. Like, people wanted to work with me. These some amazing projects came up to do this educational show on ABC, this travel show, and so that came on my radar, and I had to take it, and that brought me back in.
That show, really beautiful show. There's, I think it's like 6th season now or something like that.
It might be airing its 5th season right now.
5th season.
I think. Mm-hmm.
So the show rocked the park. Two best friends traveling to national parks across the globe now, all in an effort to raise awareness about how amazing the parks are.
Yeah.
And to help bring more conservation towards the parks and keep the parks a place that people can continue to enjoy and learn from. So how did you get involved with that show? Because you came onto the show as a filmer, right? A director of photography.
Yeah. So this fellow filmmaker had reached out, just was in town for whatever reason. I think his son was in town, wanted to have dinner. And I think no one else was around to meet him. So I volunteered to go have dinner with our friend Kevin May, an amazing colleague. And it was just to have dinner. And then he brought up that he had his friend with this production company, Tremendous Entertainment, and they were about to start the show called Rock the Park. And they were looking for a DP or a shooter to come on board to film their first season. One thing led to another, and I was fortunate enough to work on 2.5, 3 seasons of that show from there on.
What really got struck me as crazy about that project too, because you talk about it with such a, I don't know, like a calm, oh yeah, it was great. Meanwhile, what people don't know is you were doing some really intense mountaineering, glacial travel. You were in Alaska getting dropped off by plane just to, be in somewhere totally remote, totally removed from major cities, civilization, if you wanted to say.
Yeah.
You were going to deserts. You were in swamps. You were watching turtle migrations. That stuff was cool.
Yeah, that was
Less
amazing.
intense, maybe. Scuba diving, all this crazy stuff. Like, what were some of the crazier like things that you did on that show?
Oh man, it was several lifetimes worth of experience when it came to that show. We visited and filmed in about 30 parks in those 2.5 to 3 seasons. And it was a real travel adventure show. So like a helicopter didn't just drop us off at these campsites. We had to hike into these national parks, hike back out, and do it right, right. But I had to do it with 30-40 pounds of equipment, gear, and survival gear on me while filming. And so it is the hardest project I've ever worked on. And so we would go out 3 out of 4 weeks out of a month, and we would try to hit up as many national parks as possible. And I think one of the craziest adventures was we took about 3 or 4 plane rides to get to this dormant volcano in the middle out of nowhere, Alaska, this area called Aniakchak. And so we were dropped off in the middle of this dormant volcano. It was filled with water, and so we had to kayak our way out over the course of a week. And there was nobody on this island. It was just our crew of 5 or 6 people, and 2 guides. And so that was pretty intense. Just because if anything happened, there was no hospitals. It would take at least a day for a plane to come fetch us. And we were sleeping amongst the bears. It was like bear season, and so we would pitch our tents, and next to us would just be these massive paw prints of bears that had come by earlier in the day. So that made some pretty interesting restroom runs. And yeah, then my other adventure that I can think of right now was also in Alaska. We were in Denali, hiking up one of the adjacent mountaineering up one of the adjacent mountains. And I've never been to mountaineering before. I was just told we were gonna hike up a mountain or a glacier and do some filming, except we show up on the first day and our outfitter or guide was asking me, have you been mountaineering before? And I'm like, what the heck's mountaineering? And so went through all the training exercises on how to protect and like self-arrest just in case I fall into a crevasse, because we're hiking through like untouched territory, and at any point like the ground could just cave in under me and I would just fall into a massive crevasse. So, and which I kind of did. I fell about 5 feet before we were doing the hike coming down one afternoon, and then I fell about 5 feet before my guide was able to grab the rope that I was tethered to her.
You were on rope team.
We were on rope team, yeah. And so I had my own guide for that, and so she was able to just like pull me out of the hole, and we just hoofed it back to our campsite.
I never heard that.
Yeah.
Was there like more that you could have kept going? Like, was there
I don't
crevasse?
know, 'cause as soon as I dropped 5 feet, I just didn't move because I didn't want to disturb the snow and ice around me. And so, but we were like, I always try to be as present and as aware as possible, because as soon as I fell, like I knew right away like I had to like put all my training into use, and I had to just like not freak out.
It's crazy.
I still freaked out.
Oh yeah,
but I didn't do anything crazy.
I don't know who wouldn't. I mean, I remember another post that you had. Because you share some pretty awesome stuff on social sometimes. You were following the 2 hosts of the show on downhill mountain bike while you were filming.
Oh, yep. Also, very first time mountain biking. We're in the hills of Malibu or LA somewhere. And I guess I went too fast, hit a rock, had my weight distribution all wrong. And I just had my camera bag on me and a camera in one hand. And my bike just flipped forward. And so my instincts was to protect the camera.
Naturally.
I had a helmet, so I was like, my head would be fine. It's just the camera I had to protect, and I just like flipped and just like landed on my back, my knees. Got some cuts and bruises, but
the camera was safe.
Everything was safe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if the filming and the production around the show during that time wasn't impressive on its own, you also happen to be, you know, in very like Ray work ethic style, not only doing an amazing job on that project, which, like you said, went over the span of 2.5 to 3 seasons, but you were also producing and then flying out periodically for projects for Facebook.
Yeah. So into about the first season of Rock the Park, I get a call one day, and was someone from Facebook, and they just had this crazy idea. They said they wanted to do 40 plus stories a year to air one every Friday at the Facebook Q&A with like Mark Zuckerberg and Cheryl. And so they wanted a couple test shoots.
Mm-hmm.
So I told them, look, I'm coming back from, I think it was Yosemite on November 20th. Let's meet on November 22nd. And then we did our first shoot a week before Christmas. And we haven't stopped since. And that was about 3 years ago.
What is it like juggling like two really big, really important projects at the same time? Is that the norm for you?
Yeah, I never have anything less than 6 projects that are in different stages, various stages of bidding, research, production, or in the edit. Lately, it's been more of like at least a list of probably 10 projects in various stages, and so for me that's just life. I think I think I would get really bored if I just had one project to focus on. And I don't think I would do my best work either. I think I draw inspiration from working on different mediums, different projects. And I'm able to take those learning experiences to another project. Because we never want to be doing the same thing over and over and over. I think we always want to do it better and do it differently and tell a better story.
It's amazing. And the Rock the Park project really took off. It's now on ABC, right? And it was at one point on WB. You could watch the shows on Hulu, but are they also online?
It was on Netflix, I believe, at one point. I'm not sure if it still is. I don't think so, but it should be on Hulu, or you might be able to stream it on ABC.
Amazing. And that season that you worked on got some pretty good acclaim as well.
Yeah, so the very first season, crazy, just so crazy and unexpected. The very first season also got nominated and won an Emmy for outstanding daytime travel show or something.
Amazing.
Yeah, and then the years following, it got nominations for cinematography. Kind of never really expected it, but it also, I think it felt good to be recognized by our peers, but also if we think about how much work and time away from home that show took out of us, it also felt like, yeah, at least we got something out of it. I don't know. It helped.
Yeah, because when you said you'd be gone for 4 to 5 weeks in a row, you literally would be totally gone.
3 weeks a month we were on the road for almost a year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, and so it was hard.
Away from family, friends.
Yeah.
Well, other than the friends, then family that you have out there, you know. Bravo. And so Rock the Park, like your time with Rock the Park, transitioned. What made you think about and then take action on deciding to start your own production company? Because with Rock the Park, like in filmmaking, people can oftentimes take, like, if you're thinking about 2 major trajectories or 2 forks in the road, as a filmmaker, you can decide, okay, I'm going to be this. I'm going to be a filmer. I'm going to be an editor, and I'm going to work as a freelancer. So you're kind of like a I say like hired gun, but it's essentially what you're doing. You know,
Yeah.
you get hired on projects periodically, but you're not owned by any one entity. Or another route you can go, I guess there's 3 routes, is to decide, okay, I'm going to work for a production company or an advertising agency or a creative agency or a company, like a big company that also happens to have a video department. And route 3, so you have freelancer, you have working for a big company. Route 3, start your own company.
Yeah. How did I start it?
Yeah, why'd you decide to do that one?
So a story that I haven't shared with very many people is after I had left Still Motion, got my little break in, started working on Rock the Park. I actually went on this journey. I originally wasn't even gonna start my own production company. That was like never the original plan. Had no interest in that, I guess, on the business side. And I was willing to work with anybody, but it had to be someone who shared the same. I was willing to work for somebody, a company, a person, and give them like 200% of who I was in terms as a filmmaker, as a storyteller, as just a human being. Because I felt like I could take anything, we could take anything and just like take it to another level. But that person had to have the same values that I had, had to share the same mission that I had, and had to have the same work ethic. I think that was important because I knew I was going to sacrifice a lot of my personal life and to put towards work because I love like the work I do. But whoever I was working with had to, didn't have to sacrifice to the same degree that I was. I don't think that was fair, would ever be fair for me to expect from someone, but was gonna do their part, right? Was gonna deliver on their end, build a business, and I was gonna do my part. But I couldn't. Like after a couple test runs with different partners and different companies, I realized I was just what I wanted out of filmmaking was just so different than everyone else that wanted to work with me, that wanted to hire me. And so that put me in a position where I had to be my own leader. I had to start my own production company, and really so I could focus on the stuff I wanted to work on. But I also didn't just want to be a starving artist, and so I knew I had to build a sustainable business, pay people fair wages, pay myself, but also be competitive and get the projects that I want. And so I had to just learning experience, man. So many mistakes. But I'm surprised at what has transpired over the last 3 years. The people that have stuck with us, that have continued to come back and work with us, they end up being the people that I've been wanting to work with since the day I joined the working world. And
so you created the company that you hoped existed out there.
Yeah. I believe you can do great work, and run a good business at the same time, but I kept running into one or the other, and that just didn't make sense to me.
The challenges that a freelancer wouldn't understand or experience that a owner of a film production company does, or someone who runs a film production company does. Maybe that's too exhaustive of a list.
I wish you had asked me this 2 days ago, so I could have thought about that.
Because let me ask you this question, because you just explained actually some issues that came up. You guys have a project that's premiering in Dubai.
Correct.
On Dubai time zone. And there was a request for a change on the project. When did that request come in, and when did it get handled?
Yeah. So trying to think the best way to, it's not like a crazy story, but basically only 2 days the agency producing this story for the launch of this incredible missing child search program out in being released in the UAE. And so we're doing this with Facebook, another like outside agency, and then like local contacts on the ground in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and Cairo, Egypt. And so the challenge is we weren't just filming it. Like I had to find a production company, but after they filmed everything, I
Find a production company in Egypt.
in Egypt and Abu Dhabi to
What
film.
was the time frame between like when you had that request that needed to get done and then when you had to find a production company to film the?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was about, I had 4 hours, 4 to 5 hours to find, less than 5 hours to find a production company in Egypt to be filming the next morning in Cairo.
Mission success.
Oh yeah, definitely. Facebook, all these private filmmaking groups I'm a part of saved my butt. And so I put a call out. Some amazing people reached out to me. Was able to lock up a crew before people fell asleep in Egypt. And so by the time the next morning rolled around, everyone was good to go. But then we also needed an edit to be put together within 24 hours. And so we had to coordinate a WeTransfer and Dropbox setup where they shipped us footage. But the interview was done in Arabic, and so I had someone on standby. So as soon as the interviews came in, I would ship the interviews to our good friend Linda, who took those interviews to her translator in Egypt to translate the interviews, send it back to us. I had to line up the captions, edit the video together, and then send it back to our contacts in Dubai to review. And then basically, I think we just finished it around 9 o'clock this morning.
Bravo.
Yeah. So a lot of coordination, and normally like I don't even edit this much, but our editor was down sick. We had half our team was out on the road working on some projects, and so you just have to step it up. And
So
we were the agency for Facebook, and so if no matter where, if anyone along this chain of events drop the ball, I mean, I still bear the responsibility. And so it was my job to make sure everyone did their part, and it all ended up on my desk. And so it was a lot of work.
So whatever the missing pieces, you have to fill in. You have to be, which you continue to be the Swiss Army knife of sorts. You know, you handle any task really, which is incredible. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, I love it. That's like what I love to do. I love being able to like work on like multiple time zones, and like sure you lose out on sleep, but it's just this big puzzle. And I want to be the one to put it together. I want people to be able to trust me to put it together, and I won't sleep until my puzzle or their puzzle is complete and I put it together for them.
How do you guys handle effective communication, like within your team and then with your clients? Because that's something that, you know, you've always been really on top of your emails, your texts, but like what are the things that you think about that make you guys continue to succeed in that avenue?
Yeah, I've personally tried half a dozen type of different software and communication tools over the last 5 years. It used to be just all emails, simple, like, so we would hold entire conversations through email. Not great, actually pretty horrible. And we tried a lot of different things. Excuse me. But we've landed on a really good mix of Slack. Slack allows us to break our communication down by projects. And then that has reduced our email load by about, I'll say at least 50 to 70%. And then everything else is a combination of either emails or Quip or
Facebook Messenger, text message,
or text messenger, or even WhatsApp. Like we have a wide international base of like people we work with, and so a lot of them use WhatsApp. And so I at any one point I on standby for messages on text message, Messenger, WhatsApp, Slack, email, Quip. So my phone blows up, but I stay on top of it. I haven't been behind on my messages in like years.
I remember one of the things too that you said you were hoping for, or you used as a marker of your success, was how many emails you got. You always dreamed about having a job where you would get a ton of emails.
Yeah, when I was 18 and I got my first computer, maybe not 18, maybe I mean I'm like 16, got my first computer, and I got my first Juno and AOL email accounts, and I just dreamed of the day when I would be so important or so critical to someone's day-to-day function that my inbox, like I would get emails. And so I never got any emails in high school. No one, people weren't even really using it. But now my phone just blows up.
Your dream has come true.
It was a weird thing to strive for.
Yeah. So with a lot of the projects that you take on with Facebook as a client, would it be fair to say they're oriented around like documentary style filmmaking?
Yeah. So most of our work with Facebook fall along the line of the 2 to 4 minute mini documentary storytelling type things.
Why have you decided to also take on like other really big auspicious goals that fall outside of that genre? And this is like to, I guess, like explain maybe why only today and why you have decided to take on a couple other projects that are in the narrative space, that are in also the episodic space, and then also in the documentary. Yeah, so could you talk a little bit about that, like Playing with Fire?
Yeah.
And then, Nova and
I believe
the yoga project.
Yeah. I mean, I believe in continual education. And look, like my background in finance. George was an engineer. We didn't go to a traditional film school, and like we didn't even know how to use like anything about cameras or what storytelling was, or what that meant in our early 20s. And so for me, I know this is like a lifetime of learning, because our industry is such that there's no just one way of doing something, no one way of telling a story. Every story is different based on who's telling it, because based off of their life experiences, I believe. And so it's this continual challenge for me to learn as much as I can on how to approach filmmaking and storytelling, but also how to give a unique voice to the stories I tell, and changing up what we do. So we have our short form Facebook projects, but then we also just wrapped a feature length documentary, a year-long documentary, and that just forced me to think about storytelling in a different way. It forced me to approach the filmmaking side, how we filmed it, what kind of crew we put on it differently. And I would take those experiences and try to improve on what we do with Facebook. And so, and I think that's I love the challenge too. I love jumping into things I just have no idea what I'm doing, but I know it's been done before. So I know there is a path to success. There is a story I can tell here. I just need to figure out what that is. And I was a horrible student back in school, high school, middle school, college, because I couldn't do the textbook style learning. I couldn't learn step 1, step 2, step 3, and you have a result. I choose to kind of go backwards, make a ton of mistakes, do things unconventionally, and then learn the fundamentals after the fact. Because for me, making those mistakes explain to me why things are done a certain way. And for me, like that why behind why things are the way they are, how it's, I think, more valuable. It's more valuable for me. Making those mistakes is how I learn.
And those mistakes in filmmaking, it's one of those instances. I've had this instance. I don't know if you can resonate with it, but where you're on set, you're conducting a production, and mistakes are always happening, but they're not always being recognized as mistakes by everyone involved. And so I've found, because it's, it's one of those instances that you come across with crew members sometimes who are maybe newer to the field, or who haven't been on as many sets, where they can lose their temperament and start to panic a little bit. But again, it comes back to the idea that I kind of wanted to get to, which is where mistakes aren't abnormal. Like, they happen, they will continue to happen, but it's more important to have a ability to deal with those mistakes, but not make them a roadblock, but make them more of a speed bump. And it's not a mistake if, like, the mistake didn't happen unless somebody knows that it happened, who, like, what is your perspective there?
So I mean, so for any film to come together, a million different things have to happen, and they have to happen perfectly to have a smooth, drama-free, problem-free film set. But when you're looking at even a million, like 1,000 different decisions and different things that have to happen, like, something's not gonna go right. And the goal isn't to have a trouble-free set. It's to know how to just deal with these speed bumps as they come up. There are the big, I think, obvious mistakes that you can only probably make once in your lifetime or career. Because if you make it again, no one's hiring you. But there's all, like, some small stuff. It could be just like you're missing a roll of green tape when you should have green, yellow, and red, or pink, right? And so, but then you improvise, like, and find something else, find a replacement.
Improvisation. That's kind of like that master skill that is needed, right? Or mindset, actually.
Yeah, mindset. And I think my job, like, I call myself like a filmmaker or director of photography, or director, but a lot of times I just see myself as a problem solver. Clients, colleagues, friends come to me with something they want to do, and I just see it as one big problem that has to be solved. And you just try to solve it in the most efficient way possible. And that's what I think being on a set is like. Putting together a shoot. Anything can happen. People can start replying to you. An email gets lost. Someone doesn't agree with the direction of the script. And any one of those things, if you just allow it to, can kill a story, can kill a project. But it takes one person to just go, okay, next. What do we do next to overcome this?
Oh, there's so many stories that could come to mind, but I think that this concept is really one that, like, sticks with people when they can relate it to something real that's happened. And this one just came to my mind because you've told it to me before, and I loved the way that you problem solved this. But improvisation and problem solving, like, let's think of an example. Can you talk about the time where you were working with a team, you guys were filming on, which at that time was a brand new camera, the Canon C100.
Yep.
And you were filming an interview that essentially became unusable because of changing light, and you were filming abroad. Yep. Can you share that story and your perspective of improvisation?
Yeah, classic example, but I think we'll make everything clear. So we were doing an interview in London with this incredibly, like, smart guy who had a startup. It was about biometrics and health, but he had a great interview, except the day after, as we were leaving from London to Croatia to do another shoot, we realized, because of various reasons, some of the sound, the lighting issues, and just like the feeling of the interview just did not work, and it was just not usable. And we spent probably a good 2 hours trying to figure out how to redo this interview, except we couldn't change our flights. We couldn't extend more days in London. The client just was not going to approve more money for us to fly back to London after Croatia. And so we didn't have the extra $5,000-$6,000 that we needed to redo the shoot, and we were 3 hours away from having to fly out to Croatia. And I think we were just about to give up, or just figured and try to figure out another solution later. We were walking out the lobby of our hotel, and I just kind of turned to my team and was like, instead of us trying to figure out how to come back to London, why don't we just fly David, who we were interviewing, fly him to Croatia with us? And that's like maybe a $200 round trip flight. He'll get a trip out of it, and he'll just be where we're going anyways. And as soon as I said that, it just clicked, and it was like, yeah, $200 versus $6,000 to redo this entire shoot made sense. And so we texted David, asked him if he wanted to fly to Croatia with us, and we did an interview 48 hours later. And so that's, I think, classic example of having to step out of your problem to see the bigger picture and try to problem solve it as best as possible.
I love that story, and I think it embodies something like a quality that that you not only support, but you also, I think, identify that in people who are working with you, whether they're producers, whether they're filmers. One of the producers who was a longtime producer with Only Today, shout out Zacharias. I know that you guys had like there's just so many stories that could come from the projects that you guys have taken on, where you've had to do exactly that, had to improvise, had to think of solutions outside the box. I know when you were filming your narrative project, Nova, there was issues with a car, like a vintage car that it couldn't start. But you guys worked around that as well, you know?
Yeah.
Like, do any stories come to mind that also kind of exemplify that improvisation, problem solving on the spot?
Yeah. Jeez.
I want to put you on the spot right now, you know?
I might have to make a note and come back to this.
No, it's all good.
There's probably so many. That London, Croatia one was like the biggest one because...
Well, you guys were also recently doing, what was this? There was a scuba diving story, right? Yep. And one of the scuba divers needed a spotter, which is something I didn't know about scuba diving, but you always want to have a dive buddy, right? A partner. And Zach just happened to be certified in scuba, and as a producer, he decided to also be
we
buddy.
just did a story earlier this year on this nonprofit out in Roatan, Honduras.
That's right.
And I had hired an underwater DP, an amazing guy, Tony, that I've worked with on Rock the Park, and he was basically diving in with the nonprofit that was basically hosting a bunch of vets and taking them underwater to dive as part of like a healing program for their PTSD. But then the challenge was when the vets were diving and getting instruction, no one was looking after Tony, our guy, and that's just dangerous because anything can happen, right? With the air, with getting lost and stuff like that. And we couldn't wrap our heads around how to get someone in the water with Tony without just hiring someone additional and coming out with us to Honduras. But I think it took like 3 days, and then one day I just turned to Zach, who was sitting next to me at the time, and I was like, haven't you dived? And he was like, I have. I just need to renew my license. So Zach was able to go in, get recertified, and then he was basically good to go to be Tony's dive buddy because when he was underwater. And
he was already going to be on the project anyway.
Yeah, he was
as
producing
producer,
it. Yeah.
And also as fixer because he speaks Spanish as his first language, and so you guys are working in Honduras.
Yeah. So I love it. So obvious now, but like a lot of times, like the solution isn't that obvious.
Oh, it's so good. I know you can't. You know, but I guess I would want to ask because people want to know this all the time. But like, what comes to mind if somebody was to ask you, like, what are some of your favorite projects that you've worked on, or like, how do you respond to that question?
Yeah, that is so hard because I think every documentary, every project I work on, I love so much. I love the people. I love the client. I just love how we approached it. Um, Man, you're just gonna have to like point out any stories that you have heard about, and I can share about it. But
Yeah.
I know it might be a cop out.
No.
Maybe I can't. Maybe it's not great that I can like just single out like one shoe. But I love everyone that I work with like the same, right? And so I mean, I think every story, as they could be really simple or they could be really complex, but at the end of the day, if I do my job and tell that story and with honesty and with authenticity, I love it just as much. So I don't know, George.
Yeah. No, I respect that answer, and it's reminding me because we had a conversation beforehand where you had mentioned that you don't want to do anyone injustice by saying that this story was my favorite, because there's so many stories that you've helped share through filmmaking that, I don't know, represents so much about what the power of film and how wide the message can be spread through using that medium can represent, whether it's, you know, the story that you just talked about in Honduras that uses scuba diving as a means to treat post-traumatic stress, or the one that you brought me on to, where we went to Santa Cruz, California with Operation Surf, another organization working with military heroes and using surfing as a means to treat post-traumatic stress syndrome. You know, Wings Flights of Hope, where there's pilots that donate their planes to transport people who are having medical emergencies, which normally those flights can cost tens of thousands of dollars, but there's people who use the Facebook platform as a way to spread this service. You know, it's there's so many stories that come to mind. Yeah.
So I have one story. This was prior to OT, but it's a project I worked on that I think really made me really focus on what I wanted to do, and really kind of like jump started this what Only Today is today. It's and we worked on it together. So back in 2012 or 13, we're doing that. We're doing a story on child slavery around the world, and that documentary sent me and Grant, one of the directors, to Ghana, Africa, to basically check out what a slave village looks like. And so crazy adventure, crazy travel, and then it led up to me finding myself on a fishing boat with a slave owner, and then like two kids, like children, like they were probably between 8 and 12, and they were basically slaves, fishing for this slave owner. And everyone was so casual about it. Well, the slave owner was just so casual about it. Let us film and everything out on the boat with them, and I'm like, this is crazy. I can't believe this is still happening in the world. And through that time in Ghana, I also got to know this little kid who got sold into slavery like 2 times by his mother for money. And this organization we were working with, Free the Slaves, I went out and like saved him. Had to like go save him twice from a slave village, and we were walking with this kid to go interview him about his experience, and he just kind of held my hand. And his mother was just begging for us to take him back to the States with us. I think it was his aunt. Sorry, his aunt or grandmother was asking us to take this child back to the States with us because she knew there's a high likelihood he might get sold back into slavery. And that just kind of like ripped me apart. And I knew on the flight back, coming back from filming that segment, I needed to tell more of these stories. I needed to give a voice to all these people who didn't have one, that didn't have the platform, that didn't have the money or resources or reach to share their story. And if I can help one person in my lifetime to just enrich their life or get out of a bad situation, I think this entire endeavor, all this hard work, all this crazy travel is completely worth it. But I think we also have an opportunity to, and I say we because like I can't do it by myself, like with other filmmakers like you, our OT team, and just my network around the world. I think we can help like millions of people over the course of our lifetime to just like get out of poverty, get better healthcare, get better education. And so that's just like my sole focus. And so with like this production company I'm running, that's more of a like a means to an end. It might change, it might grow, it might shrink. It doesn't really matter as long as I think our focus is the same. That will guide us in terms of what I need to do next as a filmmaker, how I can best contribute to society, and have an impact that lives beyond 3 months or a payroll cycle, but hopefully lives has a profound impact for decades after like I'm gone, right? So that's me in a nutshell.
Yeah, it's a really powerful story.
Yeah.
With because I know you, I know it's not you wouldn't think about it like this, but you do, like you have for me, and I know other people who you have acted in the same way for as well, but you have been a more of a mentor figure, right? And for filmmakers or aspiring creative people or people who are thinking that maybe they want to make a career switch, mm-hmm. maybe something within the medium of film production is where they would go. Do you think about the sorts of advice that you would share with them, the perspective that they maybe would better be equipped to understand before taking that?
All the time. I think about it all the time. Personally, I think I've had to go through a lot of mistakes and just eat a lot of my own shit to try to figure out and get to a point where I am now, where I can be doing what I love and be able to have an impact and tell amazing stories. And it's taken a lot of time to get to this point. And I think if I can share some of those experiences on like a podcast like this and be able to help a filmmaker skip 2-3 years, maybe just 6 months of mistakes of learning and be able to just like start their career sooner, the sooner they'll be able to start telling stories that matter, mm-hmm. And start making an impact. But that's kind of like why I love sharing what I do. It has nothing to do with me. It's about just sharing my journey, and maybe I can jumpstart someone else's journey. Or be a mentor, because there's just like in filmmaking, there's so much technical know-how, technical knowledge you need to know, from like audio, camera, lighting, and then there's the whole storytelling aspect, which you can spend a whole lifetime in terms of learning. And then there's also just the people and communication and business side of things. Because if you're just weak on any front, I think it compromises the other. Mm-hmm. Like you want to be an amazing storyteller or filmmaker, you have to be really good with people. You have to be good on the business side and communication. Otherwise, you compromise your storytelling. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's the learning experience. I think everyone will eventually learn it if they push themselves. If I can help someone get there sooner, then for me, that's fulfilling. That's the other side of it.
I think that's really good perspective to have. One of the themes that I'm kind of carrying through the conversations, and I wanted to see where your perspective was on it, is one around like fear. You know, like previous guests have talked about using fear as fuel, or also using fear as a way to, I guess, get a signal to get away from something. Mm-hmm. I personally have been thinking about fear for myself from the lens of a physical training coach that I've had, or that I've studied with, Ido Portal, where he says when something gives you the sensation of fear, it's a signal that you need to go there. Mm-hmm. You need to like go towards it.
Yep.
You know, explore it. Why is it causing you fear? What does that mean? Is that something you need to do? Where does fear kind of lie in your?
Yeah,
in
I'm
your
on
life?
the same page. Like I wholeheartedly believe in that. When, gosh, I used to be such like really shy, really timid, just kind of just fear the unknown. Um, and I knew that kept me from being a better person, doing better in my job or schooling. And so even when we got into filmmaking, you deal a lot with strangers and clients, from weddings to like commercial and sports. And that was not my thing. Like how, like, when am I, how am I supposed to strike up a conversation with a stranger, right? Like, I don't know. Um, but I realized I needed to, and every time I felt fear, and like I used to get these major butterflies. I don't think I've told anyone this. Um, Up, I think for the first 3-4 years of like in this industry, the morning before a shoot, I would just get these major butterflies in my stomach because I just did not know if I was going to do well, if things were going to go my way, if I was going to be able to like connect with the people I'm working with. Gosh. But I kept doing it. Like I just knew that I had to keep doing it until those butterflies went away. Because if I really cared about a story, if I really cared about the people I'm working with, I have to get over myself. And so I believe, I wholeheartedly believe in like you just lean into the fear. And if something gives you butterflies, if something kind of just makes you unsure, you can either step away or you can step into it and see why. And I think I've realized over the course of this that things are never as bad as you imagine them to be. The worst case scenario usually ain't gonna happen unless you let it happen, right? But at the end of the day, if you're willing to approach things with confidence, work with people and communicate, things work out better than they probably should have.
And I love what you just said right there too, because it reminded me of that another piece of advice that you shared when you said work with people that you trust. I know that you're a big advocate of working with super talented people who you want to raise your bar or you want to raise your game up to their level. What's your perspective there about the types of people that you work with or surround yourself with?
And this is just from my personal experience. I've seen a lot of people who have amazing potential, incredibly talented, but they still struggle to either get the projects they want or the clients they want or to make a living out doing this. And like a common theme I've seen is their ego and pride gets in the way. Because out the gate, they feel like they're qualified, that they can do something, that they can deliver. But even to this day, like I know, like I'm almost faking it still, right? I'm just taking my experiences and trying to do my best for my clients and tell the best stories I could. But I know there's just probably just millions more people who have way more experience than I have, know way more than I know, and are way more naturally talented. Like getting into like filmmaking, I personally don't feel like I had a single creative bone in my body. I had to develop whatever creativity is that I have over the last 10 years. But I was very fortunate enough to just open myself and just approach people that I respected, that I've met, and just learn from them. And put them in front of ahead of me. I think there's often like this thing in what we do in our industry where you want the credit, right? You want the role, you want the recognition. But I started off this whole journey with, I don't care about any of that. I don't have an ego. I don't care about myself. I want to support someone better than me and have them get to the moon, help them get to the moon. And then I want to tag along and learn from everything that they're doing. And then maybe I'll have an opportunity to take a lead or run my own projects, run my own company one day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
You know, that advice is worth its weight in gold, not just because I agree with it or just because I said that statement, and not just because you said that statement, but precisely because you said that statement, and it's something that you have done yourself. You know, you walk the walk that you talk. Like that's why it's valuable to listen to that perspective and really like think about why you're saying the things that you're saying, but also see the results that they have created for you. And it's excluding all of the things that people don't want to talk about, all the sleepless nights, all the things that are not the glamorous like filmmaking lifestyle that you see on Instagram. And I think it's really, I really appreciate you sharing that perspective, and I admire that you believe in it, and that's something that you act on. Yeah, and I think that's really important for people to understand, and for any students to understand from their teachers when they're looking for teachers, that it's not just a teacher who's going to talk about these ideals and these principles around leadership, around creativity, if they themselves haven't actually, you know, tested the recipe, you could say. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that that's like a beautiful way to wrap this conversation, because I want people to leave on a note of learning, and appreciation.
Oh, I think learning is, you just if you allow yourself to be a student of life for life, it just opens up a world of opportunity for you. Because I mean, just last thing I'll probably say in the matter is, I'm itching to always just share, give advice, share my experiences, and not charge for it. Like, I'll just take time out of my crazy schedule, and I want to share. But it's funny how very few people have taken up on that offer. So I don't know what it is, and I just don't want to speculate, but I feel like my experience is just one out of like so many in our industry, and it's just one experience. But I feel there's just some things where some mistakes I've made that I feel other people shouldn't have made, or sometimes they'll make it because they need to learn, or they learn better that way. But if you can see those mistakes coming, you can also prep yourself for them, I think. And I think it's I wish I had more of a mentor when we jumped into all this. I think would have saved a lot of like heartache and like frustration. But you know, whatever.
Yeah, hindsight is always 20/20, and the mistakes we've made have made us the people that we are, right?
Yeah,
and we've
totally
learned and remember those mistakes. Hopefully.
I don't regret any mistakes I've ever made. Like, even if some of them have had repercussions where it just kind of ruined relationships, or you lose a client, but I think it's a lesson that I needed to learn.
Amazing.
So you embrace it.
I'm incredibly grateful for your generosity of time, energy, and perspective, Ray. For people who want to follow along your adventures and maybe want to reach out and ask for perspective and for help and things along those lines, where can people find you?
Facebook and Instagram.
What are your handles? Do you know?
I think Facebook, I don't know. Look me up, Raymond Tsang.
We'll put it in the show notes. But I think on Instagram, you're...
It's just Raymond Tsang.
RAYMONDTSANG.
Yep.
And the film production company...
OnlyToday.tv. OnlyToday.tv.
And also on Instagram at OnlyToday. And any other lasting words of wisdom you want to impart?
No, I think we should have a second episode.
I agree 100%.
I think we've only touched the surface of a lot of different things.
Scratching the surface indeed. And I would love to share conversation on the show with your amazing wife and partner in creative collaboration, Miss Joyce Tsang.
I think
as
she would
well
be great.
sometime.
Yeah, she has a whole different perspective, I think, in terms of like our story. Like I share our story like it's ours, but I'm sure she sees it very differently. So
Amazing.
I'd be interested to hear from her.
Awesome. Ray, thank you again. And looking forward to round 2.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Appreciate it.
Excellent.